What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, back with Thomas of Catch the Blitz, the legendary Thomas himself. Look at him. Look at that handsome guy. We've got him back to break down some NFC playoff teams. As we did in the AFC video, we're going to break down each team, their weaknesses, their strengths, potential matchups down the road, and their entire outlook for the playoffs. Thomas, before we get started, let the people know where they can find you on YouTube, on Instagram, and what you got going on.
Yeah, make sure to check us out on Instagram at Catch the Blitz. And of course, YouTube. It's something new that we started. We recently started a podcast that airs every Monday. So if you're into that, make sure to check us out. It would mean a lot. And Mitch, thanks for having me again. I think the AFC video went pretty well, and I'm looking to dive into what I believe is the superior conference in the NFL, and that's the NFC. So it should be some good conversation once again today.
Yeah, the AFC video, we came into it, we're like, yeah, we're going to get this all done in 2 hours, and it just went so well. We just had a great conversation, so we decided to split it up and break it down, and we want to give you guys the most analysis in depth possible. So thanks for watching this NFC video. Don't forget to Gronk spike that like button and subscribe if you are new to the channel. All right, Thomas, let's get started, and let's get started where we were started last with the AFC, and that is with the number 1 seed, the Green Bay Packers, which finished, I believe, tied with the Bucs for the best record in the NFL, and they will have home field advantage at Lambeau for the second consecutive year in the NFC. And they will have the opportunity, the clearest path as the favorites to win the Super Bowl, according to Vegas odds. Aaron Rodgers probably going to win the MVP, despite my claim that Tom Brady should win it. So, Thomas, how do you view the Packers? Are they really as strong as the odds indicate, or do you see them as more of a flawed team?
Yeah, this has been a real funny year in the NFL, and I think through so many weeks, I was constantly saying, I don't know who the best team is. Just no one's really elevated themselves out of this group of 6 or 7 teams that were really battling at it and facing inconsistencies. But then I think around the midway point in the season is where I sort of looked at the Green Bay Packers as a team that was just sort of firing on all cylinders. I had my questions about their defense going into the season, but guys like Devondre Campbell, who have stepped up in that linebacker group and really been a great story this year, and even someone like Preston Smith, who a lot of people were sort of writing off as this signing that didn't quite work out, and Rashawn Gary's been an amazing story too this year with his breakout season. So the Packers, I think, this year, they're a lot more than just Aaron Rodgers, and he's had a really good season, but I've sort of viewed them as the best team in the NFL. I think you might feel a little bit differently on that, but I've been really high on them all year long, and the fact that they have that home field advantage going into the playoffs, I think it's going to be huge. I know last year it didn't work out for them, but I've sort of felt this confidence that this year they might get over that hump. I said it earlier on a podcast this week. You rarely see a team this good get healthier going into the playoffs. And they're going to have David Bakhtiari back, Jair Alexander, and even maybe Zadarius Smith. So that is huge for the Green Bay Packers, and I think that could really benefit them in these later months of the season.
Yeah, I think that is the popular take, and I will give you the alternative take a little bit. But I agree with you. Like, if you were to put it in a power ranking, I think the Packers deserve to be first. And I've kind of been saying this all year. It's not necessarily because I feel like they're the most talented, best team, but I feel like they've been the most consistent team. The team that week to week you can rely on. They reliably beat the teams they should beat, and they've beat enough of those top teams where I say, yes, they deserve to be that number 1 seed. They deserve to be the favorite. Aaron Rodgers is playing out of his mind. So all those things are deserved. I think when you look at it, and this is kind of a thing with the Packers, when you compare them to the top teams in, a lot of the statistics, just taking across the board, they aren't a dominant team. Like, their point differential as a number 1 seed is not that impressive. Their overall, just across the board, they're not one of the top teams on all those stats, whether it's, pass offense, run defense, all those things. And it does make you like a little bit think about the previous years of the Packers where maybe they were a little bit overrated entering these playoffs because of how good Aaron Rodgers was during that season. And then better teams and better rosters beat them in the playoffs. So I think for Packers fans, that getting healthy could be the wild card to this whole thing. Because, you look at their probably main competition in Tampa Bay who's gotten injured. And Green Bay is getting healthier. So I look at them as having the best record, although I don't think they've been the most impressive team throughout the regular season. But I think they've got a good chance because of the home field and because of the health and because of the possible Alexander Bakhtiari boost that they might see. Now, from a roster perspective, I think offensive line-wise, they've kind of, I wouldn't say gotten away with it, but they've had some missing pieces, and they've been Aaron Rodgers has always been good at kind of managing that situation without all his players, and Bakhtiari, I'm intrigued to see how healthy he is and how much of a boost he'll give them, because offensive line-wise, I don't think they've faced a lot of teams where they can expose that weakness. And then on top of that, they're still very Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams reliant to me. And I think for them to go to the Super Bowl, to win the Super Bowl, they're going to need to get more out of Allen Lazard, Valdez-Scantling, Randall Cobb, whoever those weapons are going to be, obviously missing Robert Tonyan. So who do you look at as that secondary weapon? Because we know the running backs, we know the running game has been fairly solid for them. And Davante Adams is going to get his. But when you play the best teams in the playoffs that you're going to need that second or third guy to step up. Who do you think that guy is for them offensively?
Wide receiver-wise, it probably is Allen Lazard, and I do like him as a receiver. I think he does a lot of good things. But one thing I really like about the Packers offense that I think this year has sort of caught me by surprise and has really come on strong for them later on in the season is A.J. Dillon. This is a really, really good running back. And on a lot of teams, he's probably your workhorse that's getting that 20-plus carries a game. But the dynamic that they have with him Aaron Jones, it's just so refreshing because one guy is, he's shifty, he's quick, he can be used as a receiver. You can run him inside the tackles and outside. And then there's A.J. Dillon, who's just going to put his head down and pick up those really tough yards and tire out a defense. So, yeah, you mentioned that you think that they need that other receiving threat. And, I like Allen Lazard and, missing Robert Tonyan is tough. I think Davante Adams is good enough that I don't care what you do. I don't care how you scheme against him. He is going to dominate. His chemistry with Aaron Rodgers is something that I think, people talk about the physical aspects of his game, but
yeah, it's the chemistry for me too.
The way the placement of the balls, the way he throws it to the back shoulder on these incredible fades is just like second to none in this league. I don't remember, like maybe Brady Moss. Like that's the last time we've seen something that good. So I think it's the fact that we know, like you said, we know Davante Adams is going to get his, but the fact that they can beat you now on the ground with not just one guy but two, I think is something that's really valuable for this team.
I think, actually, talking about A.J. Dillon, I think they should be giving him a bulk of the carries, and I think they should be using Aaron Jones as that kind of like change of pace because that's more suitable to his style. He's lighter, especially in these cold weather games where A.J. Dillon can kind of like Derrick Henry you, like wear you down, and then Aaron Jones can be used more on third down as a receiver. You can keep him fresh. That's just kind of like my opinion on that, but I still think though, I do think like in the NFC Championship, in the Super Bowl, when you're facing the top teams, you might get away with it against the Bears, but I feel like when you play the top teams, you need secondary weapons to step up. Maybe it's Allen Lazard, maybe it's Randall Cobb. As soon as I see that, I'll say, okay, this team's different. Because last year I felt like part of the reason they weren't able to get over the hump was it was too Davante Adams and not enough other players were able to chip in when the chips were down. Aaron Rodgers is amazing. The offense is very good. They're balanced. I think that's something that a lot of people like, especially at this time of the year. They can rely on the run game, the pass game. Defensively, what has impressed you about this unit the most?
I think it's probably their front seven, and I mean their secondary has had some nice stories. Like we know guys like Adrian Amos is good players, and the fact that they were missing Jair Alexander and someone like Rasul Douglas, a practice squad player, has stepped up and
Yeah.
had a really good season. Like that's a nice story. But I
He's
think
a
their front,
journeyman.
yeah,
This
like
guy has been on so many teams and been terrible. And then all of a sudden he's like amazing on this team. I don't understand it.
he has the lowest passer rating allowed amongst all quarterbacks with a minimum of 50 targets on the year, I believe. So it's crazy. He's not just getting interceptions; he's locking down players as well. So that's a nice story. But their front seven, like they have a lot of talent, and I'm really excited to see Zadarius Smith back with that group. I mentioned Rashawn Gary earlier. He's one of, I think, the best
He's a
edge
beast.
rushers in the NFL
Yeah.
this season. So they're best at putting pressure on the opposing team's quarterback, and I think that they do that very well. The run game is something that's always plagued the Packers in the past couple of years. I don't know if they've quite figured that out exactly just yet, but they are making strides. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they have this top three defense in the NFL, but I definitely think it's better than it has been in past years, and it's one that's capable of not carrying Rodgers to a Super Bowl, but supporting him and making it that he maybe doesn't have to do everything on his own this year.
Yeah, that is. I really think, like, you look at their pass defense, and with Alexander back in there, and potentially Dallas missing Michael Gallup, the Rams missing Robert Woods, the Bucs missing AB and Godwin. That's very helpful, because I thought, like, last year when their depth wasn't good enough. They had Alexander, and he would, let's say, cover Evans, but then Godwin would be able to get open and make plays for the Bucs. Like, so this year they've got that little extra layer of depth at the cornerback position. Their safety position is very strong. I think it's probably, the most underrated duo to, in the league, from Amos and Savage. I think they're very athletic. They can cover in zone man. I do wonder about that run defense. I think they've got the pass rushers, like you said. It's very Kenny Clark reliant in the run game, it feels like. And they still rank very low in a lot of metrics versus the run. So I wonder how they'll handle certain teams, like if they have to play, the Niners in the next round, or they've got to play Leonard Fournette in the Bucs, or they've got to play the Rams or the Cowboys. I think it will be interesting to see how they handle the run game, because I think that's the one thing that could keep them back from the Super Bowl, is keeping Aaron Rodgers on the sidelines and having teams time of possession them and just beat them by not having Aaron Rodgers on the field. I mean, we've seen the Vikings kind of capitalize on that for the last couple of years. So that is, to me, like their Achilles heel on a team that doesn't have many of them.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very fair assumption of the team. I mean, I still think that they're a very well balanced roster, and I do like them toe to toe against most teams. We both sort of talked about one team that we don't think is a very good matchup with them, and I feel like we'll get to that later. I don't want to ruin it now, but I mean, yeah,
Let's ruin it now.
Let's ruin it
I think
now.
that's the next step. I mean, I think it's the 49ers. I don't know if you agree with me.
No, I mean, I have.
I think Tampa
flashbacks
Bay
to
is a bad matchup as well, because they beat them twice last year. They haven't played this year, but like that defense seems to have a good handle on like what the Packers do well. But I think the 49ers, and in that Vikings mold of how they can possess the ball, they've got Debo and Kittle. Kyle has kind of been able to. They beat them in the playoffs a couple years ago. Like Kyle's been able to destroy their defense in the run game, and then defensively they've got that pass rush with Nick Bosa where they can get after Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, and I remember that game. You said they beat them in the playoffs a couple years ago. You didn't mention that they beat them with Jimmy Garoppolo only throwing 10 passes in that game. And they didn't just squeeze out a victory. Like they beat
it was
them
easy.
down bad. And that was a year where I was totally flipped on the team. I'm very high on the Packers now. That year I was screaming fraud, fraud, fraud. I don't like how they're built. They're,
I
like you
think
said earlier, they're
everyone
too
was,
Aaron Rodgers.
to be
Yeah,
honest.
it just wasn't a year where I was confident. The way they were winning games was like, it just, you didn't feel like they had any chance to win a Super Bowl, and that showed in that championship game. Um, this year, I do think they're built differently. Are they still built to go toe to toe with a smash mouth football team like the 49ers? I don't know, but I think I have more confidence. But it's definitely one of the worst matchups of all, because if you look at how the other NFC teams are built, they'll attack you in the air. Like Dallas has a three-headed monster of receivers. I know Gallup's injured now. The Rams are just, let's see how
Yeah.
many times Matthew Stafford can connect with Cooper Kupp. So those teams, listen, I think Green Bay can just drown them out with how they play. But the 49ers are definitely like one that I would be semi-worried about.
Yeah, I think as the favorites, you always got to worry about those teams where it's like, ooh, I don't know. That's a sneaky, like, tough matchup for us. Like, I remember with the Patriots in these same spots with the bye weeks, it was always like, okay, we got to win one game. And a lot of times, the divisional round was tougher. When we would face, like, the Baltimore Ravens, I'm like, that's a tough matchup. Like, they're tough, they're physical, they've got a good defense, so, and I look at, obviously, Tampa Bay as a team that they beat them twice last year. They've got a very strong front seven. I think their secondary, when healthy, is pretty good and can match up decently well with the Packers. And obviously you've got Tom Brady, and they're not phased to go to Green Bay. And there might be a little bit of that mental block for the Packers after last year to get over that hump. But I believe that those would be the two toughest teams that they would have to face along the road. I think anybody else, I feel very confident in their ability at home to get the job done.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you talk about the 49 or not the 49ers, the Buccaneers. We might as well go into them now. They are the two
Yeah.
seed. And you talked about the whole mental aspect. That's something that I'm worried about with the Packers, because like, are they ready to exercise their demons against a Tom Brady led
Right.
team who we know can get it done every single year? Like the Bucs, let's be honest, they've faced so much adversity this year, and they're
Yeah.
depleted in so many different areas. The secondary's been a mess. Now the wide receiver position is such a question mark. So I don't know. It's just, I personally think that's going to be the NFC Championship. I think we deserve that as NFL fans, to see Brady and
The
Rodgers go
rematch.
toe to toe once again. I think that would be awesome. I don't know. I know you're a big Bucs guy, so I'm always interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, Tom Brady guy. Like, I mean, anybody that I know, Thomas, you're a Dolphins fan. You don't like Tom Brady. You don't like TB12. You don't like the propaganda. But I look at Tampa Bay as kind of getting disrespected entering the playoffs. There are so many people that are like just not even talking about them as winning the Super Bowl. Like, they're kind of, maybe it's like the Brady, they're tired of him or something. I don't know. But I look at this team as still as talented as any roster in football, and I think the main piece for their success is we know Tom Brady's going to get the job done. Their offensive line, to me, is the best in the game. Okay? They've got pieces on offense. They still got Mike Evans and Gronk. Those are two pieces that I think Brady can rely on. Leonard Fournette, playoff Lenny, can rise to the occasion. And they've got some secondary pieces where I wouldn't be surprised if you heard of Brashad Perryman throughout the playoffs as making a few plays. But defensively is the X factor for maybe the entire playoffs of the NFC. Because if that defense can turn it on, and we haven't seen the full 11 starters all year. The first game of the year, Sean Murphy-Bunting gets hurt. Weeks later, Carlton Davis gets hurt. We've seen Jamel Dean leave. We've seen Winfield leave. We've seen Edwards leave. Like, literally every player in the secondary. Levante Davis hurt at the end of the year. Vita Vea got hurt for a couple games. JPP, Shaq. Like, that might be the problem with them, is they're just beat up, and they can't execute at the right moment, and they can't put it all together right away and make that run. But if you look at them now, this is the first time that they might have all of their defense together since the start of the year, and that's potentially a scary thought for the other NFC teams, with the way that when that group's together, they pretty much lock down the running game and they force you to be one-dimensional, and they've got the pass rushers to be able to get after you. So I think it's a combination of Tom Brady and the greatness of him with a potential X-factor defense. If that defense doesn't come to play, I don't think they've got a shot to beat the Packers, to beat the Cowboys in those teams.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the defense because we haven't seen them pretty much together all year. And I think it was a great move, veteran move by a veteran coach, and I'm sure that Tom Brady had a lot of say in this as well, to shut guys down near the end of the
Yeah.
season and just say, okay, you're not gonna play for the next 3-4 weeks, but in the playoffs you're gonna be fully healthy. And the 49ers did that earlier in the season with George Kittle, and we all saw how that paid off. So I think that was a great move. You hope to see that defense back and fully loaded in the playoffs because I don't mean this is a slight against Tom Brady, but that defense really, really came up huge
Yeah.
late in the playoffs last year, especially in the Super Bowl where they were all over Patrick Mahomes. So that's probably 100% not only the X factor for the team, but like you said, in the playoffs as a whole. The Bucs, even with injuries, they've been a team that is just pretty much impossible to run on in the playoffs. And I think, or not just in the playoffs, all season long. That's obviously led by Vita Vea, who's a top 5 defensive tackle in football. And what that means going up against the rest of the NFC opponents, if you take away the run for all of these teams, it is very, very hard for those quarterbacks to beat you. Dak has struggled at times this year when he just has to drop back and throw, 40 times a game. Matthew Stafford as well. I think he's best when, Sony Michel and Darrell Henderson are
Yeah.
going. I'm worried
And
about him.
we'll talk about the Rams, but just the Rams in general have always been built off the philosophy of run, play, action, right? So that's kind of a Stafford and McVay sort of thing. And like you said, I think especially if it's in Lambeau, who knows? The game could be snowing. What happens there if the Packers are averaging 2 yards a carry? And we know that the weakness of the Packers is the running game, and Leonard Fournette could potentially go off in that setting. So it does give them a major edge in a lot of ways to have that full defense back on top of Todd Bowles, who's a very creative game planner. Offensively, there's certainly the concerns of let's say they're playing the Packers. Alexander takes Evans. Okay, who's that receiver that's going to step up? Obviously, Gronk is there, and he's looked really good this year. I think his 17-game numbers were over 1,200 yards. He's been really good. So he's a problem, and teams got to deal with that, but it's not like they've got Godwin and AB and all the other resources that Brady had in the past. So obviously I have a better feel for the team, and like I said, Perryman, and I think you could see guys like Grayson or Miller have a little bit of or Brait even, make a few plays. But do you see that as a major concern? Because I know a lot of people are looking at this situation as they can't get it done without Godwin in there.
I think I've learned now through all the years in the past of watching football and watching Tom Brady in the playoffs, it's I'm almost want to approach with caution because even when things are looking rough, he's had this ability to just somehow put some wins together, and next thing you know, he's lifting the Super Bowl over his head. So even though this year it doesn't look great, nothing would surprise me at this point if he somehow finds a way because he's just been doing that for so long in his career. Obviously, you talked about guys like Scotty Miller stepping up, and I think we talked about the Packers earlier, and that's their main competition. You have to go through Lambeau probably if you want to get to the Super Bowl.
Probably.
The Packers they rewatched that game, the game that I call the Kevin King game, and they bolstered that issue. They grabbed Eric Stokes, who's been a really, really good rookie, and they also, the Rasul Douglas story that we mentioned earlier. Whereas the Bucs now, they're lacking in that area. So I think they're going to have to beat the Packers in a different way. And playoff Lenny, who got that name because of his play in the playoffs last year, has completely brought that playoff form into the regular season. So if he has just another dial to go into, he's going to be a big problem in the playoffs. So maybe the Bucs have to win in different ways this year because they don't have Chris Godwin. They don't have Antonio Brown. But like I said, I'm not in the position where I feel comfortable of saying no, it's not Tom Brady's year. He doesn't have, the resources. His team's depleted because like I said, he's done it time and time again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if they in a couple of these matchups, maybe it's not advantageous in some of them, but to go to a more of a power running approach and using the play action. And we're talking about a team that passed more than anybody in the NFL this year, right? Tampa Bay. So from the weakness perspective, I have all the confidence in the world for Brady and even like him to work with those players. It's more so of, can the coaching staff operate their offense, Bruce Arians, Byron Leftwich, can they be creative enough to find ways to get over the hump, but without their all-star talent? Because most often this Bucs scheme has relied on those just really good players and focusing on them just making plays. So I think they're going to have to rise to the occasion more than anybody to be able to get over those losses. So personally, it's the coaching staff. It's not necessarily the players even, because I think like when you look at Perryman and Grayson, I know they're not big names, and Scotty Miller, but those guys are fast. They're fast. They all run 4-3. So like they're going to threaten a defense. Tyler Johnson as well as tough in the middle in the slot. So they've got skill sets. It's more so like putting them in the right position for them to shine. Lastly, with the Bucs, which team do you think is like a really tough team for them to face potentially? They play the Eagles in the first round. We assume they should get over the Eagles in the first round, although the Eagles have shown a feistiness throughout the season. But who do you view as the rest of the field as a tough matchup?
I think I'm going to stick in that NFC East, and it's not going to be the Eagles, just because I think what the Eagles do well, the Bucs are incredibly good at shutting down, and that's the run. But the Cowboys in week 1, I know this is so long ago now, but they really, really impressed me against the Buccaneers. And I think if Dak Prescott is on his game and they can utilize both Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, not necessarily just running it up the middle, but in very creative ways, I think the Cowboys can present a pretty difficult matchup, just because even at full strength, the Bucs don't have that shutdown corner. They have good corners in Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting, and even Jamel Dean, I think, is a pretty underrated player. But I don't think they have a complete lockdown guy that can just isolate CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper and just remove them from the game. And I think that's where Dallas gets dangerous, because it's not just CeeDee Lamb, it's also Cooper, and they get Dalton Schultz involved, and even Cedric Wilson at times has been good this year. So Dallas just has so many different ways in which they can attack, and I think that could threaten the Bucs if they're not ready. But like I said, Dak Prescott really has to be on his game for it to be a Dallas upset.
Yeah, I think Dallas is a good one. I could see an avenue for that. Like you said, Dak's got to be on his A game, obviously facing Tom Brady, and I think Tom would probably have some success on their defense, but I think their defensive line could make enough plays where they could come through and get some pressure and, maybe change the game that way. Offensively, they've got, and one of the problems with Dallas, and we might as well transfer to Dallas here, Dallas is almost too like trying to get their run game going. And in that first matchup, they just kind of abandoned the run and passed all day, right? And that helped them in a way to almost win that game. There were some things where Tampa Bay kind of was very sloppy, and there was some turnovers and things, and for an upset to happen, that might have to happen again. But like Dallas has that passing game where when they hone in on it, especially short, their screens and things would get the ball in the hands of CeeDee Lamb and Cooper. That could be dangerous. And I just like to flip here and say, I think the Rams are another team. They did beat the Bucs earlier in the year. They beat them last year. There's at least the track record of showing that they match up fairly well with Tampa Bay as long as Stafford doesn't turn the ball over. I think that McVay has shown a very good capacity to kind of dice up that defense, and they have had enough of their, defensively, Aaron Donald and company have kind of pressured and made Tom Brady uncomfortable. And I think the key for the Bucs is going to be keeping Brady comfortable. Like I said, probably the top offensive line, but when you can take that advantage away from them, it becomes a problem, especially without a lot of their weapons. So those two teams I think are very intriguing for the Bucs. But Dallas, as we brought up, the third seed in these NFC playoffs, they're a tough team to really figure out and gauge where people stand on them. I think a lot of people are really high on them, and I think a lot of people think they're going to lose the first game. So it's tough because at points they've looked like a potent, unstoppable force. At other points, they haven't been able to rise to face those top teams and take them down. So where do you stand on the Dallas Cowboys? Do you think they're a legitimate threat to get to the Super Bowl, or do you think they're kind of frauds?
I wouldn't use the word frauds. I'm probably somewhere in the middle on the Cowboys. There are weeks where I
Fair.
think really highly of. I'm a big fan of what they do offensively, but like you said, it has been a little bit inconsistent at times. Some games, just the play calling is just a fraction of what it was
Yeah.
the week before. I'm looking forward to Kellen Moore sort of just opening up everything, and it's the playoffs now. If you lose, you go home. So you got to bring all the bells and whistles, all the tricks for that first playoff game. I will say this, though. I think the take that the 49ers are going to upset them, I just feel like everyone is on that now, that the 49ers are now favorites. Like, it literally
They're
it feels
not,
like
but yeah,
they're not,
I
but
get what
it
you're
just,
saying. There's a lot of people picking the
yeah.
49ers.
Everyone I hear from, it's, the 49ers are going to upset the Cowboys this week. It's just, it seems like I think it's going to be a really, really close game.
It should be.
I don't necessarily. I'm not going to lean one way or the other. I do think it's going to be close, but I also believe that at their best, Dallas can compete with anybody in the
Mhm.
NFC. Whereas, an upset team like the 49ers, I don't know if I can quite say that just because of who they have at quarterback. Dak Prescott. I think it's laughable if we look back months ago that the people were cheering when he signed that contract. The NFC East fans were cheering that they signed that contract, thinking like, oh, Dallas completely overpaid this guy. He's had a really, really good season. He does everything very, very well. And I don't know. I think if you look throughout their entire roster, the Cowboys, there's not a lot of holes. It's A or B at pretty much every single position. Their defense has been one of the stories of the season. Dan Quinn's done an amazing job. And when you have guys like Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs, who's become this interception machine,
Yeah.
I like what they have. I think they have potential to make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, they've got a lot of like high leverage situations defensively. They can take over a game with their pass rush. They've proven that they can get a lot of turnovers, and offensively they can strike in a hurry through the pass or sometimes the run. Although you look at them and for whatever reason they haven't been able to get the run game going as well throughout the last half of the season with Zeke. And I feel like Tony Pollard's got to be more involved. I know a lot of people are saying that. That's a very common take. But Zeke just doesn't really, to me, have that burst at this moment for him to garner all these carries. I think Tony Pollard should be getting at least half the workload there for Dallas if they're going to lean on the running game. They've got a lot of strengths. I think I look at the defense as maybe a little bit overrated because they haven't faced a lot of good offenses, especially over the last half of the season, where like I think there was a stat where like the last 8 games they've faced all run offenses of 21st or worse in the NFL, and they haven't really faced a run offense that could take advantage of potentially, a front that is not very good. If they have a weakness, it's a D tackle, and the size of their front is very light, and it's very pass rush and aggressive and oriented, right? They're trying to get uphill, get to the quarterback. That's Dan Quinn's style. And I think teams like the Niners, that's why I think that pick is so common, could attack that. I also see weaknesses to pass the ball, especially to tight ends and potentially to the nickel position. I think Trayvon Diggs is one that is very hit and miss. Sometimes he's amazing. Sometimes he's allowed the most yards in the NFL. So they're very, defensively, they could have an amazing run, or they could be the reason the team loses, in my opinion, because they're so aggressive and so, come or go. Offensively, I think I just need to see. I really believe in them if I felt more confident in their current product of Dak Prescott, because there were moments this year where I thought Dak was playing at a top 3 level. Like the Patriots game, I thought he was incredible. Like he was amazing. So if I saw that consistently, I'd be all over the Cowboys as a potential team to win the Super Bowl. I just don't know if I get that sense. I don't know. Thomas, what do you think?
I think consistency is key. And when we talked about the Packers, you said you don't know if that they're the best team, but they've been the most consistent.
Yeah.
And going into the playoffs, you sort of have a feel like you know what you're going to get from the Packers. And I feel like that's why a lot of people are struggling with the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
I think CeeDee Lamb's a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But he also had a stretch this season where I think he went like 6 or 7 games without a touchdown. Like that, to me, that's a problem. You know, he should be your number one option on offense. Get him the ball, get him involved. I think these weeks where he only has 5 catches, like he should be getting the ball 8 or 9 times every game because he's that good. He's dynamic. So consistency, I understand. Like I think that's where you and a lot of people are sort of hesitant with them. I don't know. I believe that we're going to see at some point their sort of best foot forward in
I
these
hope
playoffs,
so.
and that's why I feel sort of confident in the Cowboys. But like I said, I think it's going to be a real tight matchup early on for them.
I I kind of am sick of like the Dallas Cowboys like underwhelming in the playoffs.
Yeah,
Like
I don't really believe in that take either. Like if Aaron Rodgers made one of the greatest plays I've ever seen from a quarterback, and Jared Cook made one of the greatest catches I've ever seen from my tight end to knock them out when I believe that was Dak's rookie year. So that
yeah,
to me
I'm
that's pretty
I'm
impressive
sick
if
of
you
like
in
the
that spot.
media bringing that up, and I do
Yeah,
want to. My dad's a Cowboys fan. Like I want to see them be successful at a certain point. It's just like you said, the consistency for me is the reason I could see them being the team to represent the NFC or the team that loses in the first round. Like that's just the way I view them right now. And I think that's an interesting point you brought up with CD. And I think that's the X factor for them is getting the vertical passing game going. A lot of times Dak Prescott's ADOT is far too low. They're too conservative. I don't know if that's Dak or Kellen Moore or what that is, the route tree of the offense, but a lot of times they're not attacking teams vertically down the field and creating explosive passing plays. A lot of the times it's screens and it's short passes and it's run game. It's like, and I know the stats back this up, they just feel like a team that aren't always playing to what could be the biggest strength of the team, which is Cooper down the field, CD down the field, Dak making these passes down the field. And maybe that's the limitation of Dak Prescott. I'm not sure. But I think they need to push the envelope on that to be their best team.
I just think they have so many weapons on paper that you'd feel like it's such a nightmare matchup for defenses because they'd have so many different players to worry about that
Yeah.
it's just like how are we ever going to stop these guys? So maybe they just have to be a little bit more creative and like you said, go all out and take risks because at this point, if you lose, you're going home and it's a long 9 months until you play your next game. So I'd like to see them just go all out here. You know, no leashes on anything. Just go for it. And I think we'll see that. Dak ended the season, I thought, on a pretty good note. Those 2 primetime games to finish. I know the competition wasn't all that great going
Looked
up
good.
against a Washington team and then an Eagles team built off mostly backups. But hey, great players can beat down bad players, and Dak proved that. So I don't know. I have this little bit of confidence with the Cowboys, I think, going into this week. But like I said, and you've said too, it's a tough matchup.
Yeah, it's a tough team for me to narrow down and figure out what's going to happen. But I think we see both avenues for the Dallas Cowboys. A team that is maybe even more difficult to figure out is the Los Angeles Rams with Matthew Stafford. They're a team that at points have looked like the best team in the NFL, and I know that they've been billed as such, maybe incorrectly, but they have. And then at other times, they look like they might even slide out of the division title and into a wild card, or They just looked like a complete fraud at a certain point. So this is a football team that's coming off of a loss to the Niners in a game where they went all out to win. That's been a very difficult matchup as they've lost a bunch in a row to that football team. But this is a team that I also said earlier is one of those teams that I think matches up well with Tampa Bay. So they're a complete wild card to me with Matthew Stafford and his play. Do you see them as the same way, a team that can be very good or very bad? Or do you just see them as a team that maybe is flawed?
I think I'm looking back to when we did our AFC preview yesterday, and I just felt like I had a much more clear understanding. Like I knew what I was getting with each team. And
Yeah,
maybe in the NFC it's just because there's what I believe to be more good teams and maybe the matchups are a little tighter. Like this game between the Rams and the Cardinals, I think like I have no idea what to
yeah,
expect.
I
We've
agree.
seen them play twice this year. The first time out, the Rams were heavy favorites. The Cardinals blew them out of their own building. The second
Yeah,
time out on Monday Night Football, everyone said, "Oh, the Cardinals are going to take this one easily," and the Rams dominated them. So
yeah,
the Rams have been funny in the sense that when the public opinion is very, very high on them, they tend to let people down. And then just when you think it's time to count them out, they sort of have a
yeah.
bit of a resurgence. I've always been a Matthew Stafford believer. My eyes
Me
have been
too.
opened a bit this year that the knock on him is that he can't deliver in these big time moments, and he has struggled with that this season. So, like I said, and like you said, they're a complete wild card. I don't really know what to expect. I still don't think that they've looked the same since Robert Woods was injured, and I think he was a very
I kind of
underrated
agree.
part of this team. Someone like Daryl Henderson got off to a phenomenal start to the season, and now he's the backup running back. I mean, Sony Michel's been pretty good as well, but I don't know. It's been an up and down season from them. And like you talked about consistency with the Cowboys, I had this belief that we're going to see the best Dallas. I don't know if we're going to see the best version of the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs.
Yeah. I they're they're tough, man. They're tough. I think when you look at them offensively, you made a great point with Robert Woods and although I don't stand with Troy Aikman as Robert Woods being the best receiver in the NFL, I do believe him to be a good football player and the little things he does for the offense, the blocking, the Yak. He's usually the guy that creates the like jet sweeps. He's the runner, right? He's like the Debo kind of that way for McVay, and then also just the consistent short target. And that's something I feel the Rams have gotten away from a little bit. They're almost too Cooper Kupp. Too Cooper Kupp. It's too much Cooper
Yeah.
Kupp. And he's phenomenal, and that connection is amazing. But Odell has been a different receiver for them. He hasn't really been the short target, and Van Jefferson hasn't really filled that role for Robert Woods, and it just feels like they're missing the layups in the offense. They're missing the consistency. It's all like run game and then vertical shot and hope it doesn't get picked off. Like that's what it is to me a lot, or crossers to Cooper Kupp. That's like what we see from the whole offense, and I just don't know if there's enough consistency, especially when defenses can hone in on, okay, we got a double cup, maybe, occasionally have a safety over top if this is the formation that Odell's going to get a shot out of, and then we've got to stop the run game on early downs, and they're very reliant on getting those early down runs going to set up the play action, and I understand why they've gotten back to that, because their offensive line, I think, they rank very high in like a lot of metrics, right? Sack percentage and things like this, but when you just watch them in a lot of games, they've been the reason they've lost. Like the Niners game, they got consistent pressure the last game of the season on Stafford. 58% of dropbacks in the second half. Pressure, right? The Titans game, complete butt kicking of the offensive line. Like just lost them the game because Stafford was always under duress. And Stafford's not a guy that's going to consistently make people miss. He wants to move in the pocket, kind of like Dak, where he moves in the pocket and steps around and makes a throw. And that interior offensive line has let them down numerous times. So I feel like that play action is so essential for them to be set up with good pass blocking. Because when they're in drop back pass, they always get destroyed. So I think there's there's an avenue for them if they can keep the run game going and then consistently be put in good situations where they can be a very dangerous offense to stop, especially with their receivers. But if they are not good on those early downs, that's where they fall into trouble, and they end up getting Stafford into trouble, and that's where Stafford throws interceptions and they lose the game.
Yeah, and Stafford's interceptions it's been the downfall of this team. And when he's protecting the ball, they're excellent, and when he's not, things like what happened last Sunday happen. I think they're really glad that it's very, very unlikely that they're not going to see the 49ers in the playoffs, because Sean McVay
NFC Championship, maybe?
Yeah, NFC Championship is the only way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Sean McVay's just had
imagine that. That would suck so hard for the Rams. They're like,
Yeah, they upset the Buccaneers, and then they have to go and play the 49ers, and man, like that would be something. But like I said, it's very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
The Rams are they're very, very up and down. And I think we first started this, and when I said all year long, I didn't know who the best team in the NFL was. And I think going into the season, I had high hopes for the Rams because of how good they were last season. But their defense, let's be honest, they lost some key players in free agency.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Nobody talks about this, Thomas.
Like their defense is not the defense that it was last year, because last year they were carried by a defense with a limited quarterback in Jared Goff. Now it's almost flipped. Like they have this very talented quarterback in Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
With this inconsistent defense, and then when their offense isn't on, they lose. I don't know. They're deep. It's top heavy. Yeah, Jalen Ramsey's great. Who do you have after that? Like Darius Williams at corner has not had the year that he had last year. The safety position, Taylor Rapp's a good player, but the front seven is a little bit lackluster, I think, as well. Of course, you have Aaron Donald there, but after that, again, it's a drop off.
I'm so happy you brought it. I gotta give you a hand of applause,
Thank you.
bro. Nobody talks about this. Everybody just blames Stafford for the Rams' faults, and I'm a big Stafford guy. And I predicted, like, before the year, I'm like, okay, the Rams got Stafford because they know that their defense won't be the same. And defense year to year doesn't really carry as well, right? One year a defense could be the best in the league. The next year they could be 16th. Like, it's not really a consistent, sticky thing in the NFL. You can't count on it year to year. So the Rams correctly assessed their team and said, our quarterback's not good enough. Let's get a new quarterback. Okay, their offense has been much better. Last year, their offense wasn't good. If you look at the stats, they were like in the 20s, right? And it's hard to believe for a McVay offense, but that's the truth. Their defense was number one. That's why they won in the playoffs. They beat Seattle, and then they went to the Packers. This year, their defense has been pretty good, but it's not the best in the league. And there's certainly flaws. Like you can, like you say, in the passing game, just stray away from Ramsey. Just pass wherever he isn't. Like whether that's out of the backfield, attack their linebackers with your running back, use your tight end, or attack the opposite side of the field. You can pass on them. And they play a lot of zone. You know, they tried to hide those other guys by playing a lot of zone. And then up front, they're good, they're talented, but they're very reliant on pass rushing. Right? When you can stay balanced and run the ball, and this is why the Niners have beat them both times, because they're very speed. Like they brought in Von Miller, they've got Leonard Floyd. Like these guys are lighter. They're meant to rush the passer. They lost Sebastian Joseph Day, who's their run stopper, who I think's been a major loss for them this year, because when teams can run on them, it keeps them out of those situations, and that's where they're really good. Is like 3rd and 8. Okay, now they can dial up Aaron Donald over here, 4 guys over here, and then the pocket collapses and you're done. So, like, that is a team that I think is very, like, situationally matchup dependent, that I feel like if they play certain teams, I'd give them a decent chance. Other teams that know how to attack them and beat them, I look at them as a flawed side. So the Rams have a lot of upside, a lot of talent. I don't know if they have a cohesive team, and much of that is because of the depth on defense.
100%. I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Like, it's not the same unit that it was last year. You look back, yeah, they won a playoff game last year against Seattle, but that was all like it was a dominant performance
Yeah.
from Aaron Donald and company. There was a lot of other guys there. I don't think we're going to see that this year. And I mean, I think the team that they're playing is just as funny as they are, but at the same time, it's very reliant. Like if Matthew Stafford is going to show up and throw a couple interceptions, they're not going to find success. And if he's going to show up and have a great game, I think this team can go very far. But the way their team's almost engineered now is it's just going to go as far as Stafford can take them because they're not really built to do many other great things outside of that. So that's where I'm worried with the Rams. And I think now we're at the point, like this is the 4 seed. We're starting to see a bit of a drop off from the top dogs that we've already spoken about. But yeah, that's sort of where I am with this Rams team.
Look, they signed Eric Weddle. Like,
Yeah, I don't even like. Is that even a worthy thing to like? What is he going to come in there and make like? What has it been?
I love
Two
Eric Weddle.
seasons?
He's a phenomenal
No,
player, but he's old.
phenomenal career. But you're telling me that this guy somehow managed to stay ready for an NFL playoff game? Like you can train all you want at home. You can stay
He
in,
retired two
tip-top
years
shape.
ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. And when he retired, he had already lost a lot of,
Yeah.
the speed, the instincts that you need to play free safety. So I don't know. Like he could have stayed in great shape, but I just don't think you can like you can't have that NFL speed without playing in the NFL. So I don't know what that whole move was all about. Maybe it's to make sure that Jalen Ramsey stops punching Taylor Rapp in the face in huddles because Eric Weddle's a great guy for leadership and all that. I don't know. That move was kind of like, okay, it doesn't
You know what
really
it says
move
to
the needle
me
for
is
me.
it says we're worried about our secondary depth.
Yeah,
That's what it says to me. But yeah, that's the Rams, a team that I view as somebody that it's very high upside, low floor, right?
yeah.
High ceiling, low floor. That's what I view them as. The 5 seed could be the same. The Arizona Cardinals, they take on the Los Angeles Rams in the first round. And this is a matchup, like we said, we've seen twice, and both teams won each. So both teams have a fair opportunity to take it in the first round. So the Cardinals are a football team that at one point, we know this, they looked like the best team in the league for some people, although I never fully bought into that. As many of you guys know, I never put them at the top of my power rankings, and I got criticized a ton for that. So I do have to bring that up. But the Cardinals are a football team that Kyler Murray can be just a dimension to their team, that he takes over, he makes plays, and he can win them any game. This is a team with a lot of playmakers on defense. I think a solid scheme on defense, and I'm not sure what the status is of DeAndre Hopkins, but he could also be a game changer for them. If he doesn't play this week and they still manage to win maybe down the road. Thomas, how do you view the Cardinals? Do you view them as a dark horse and maybe we're sleeping on them, or do you view them as a team that's not playing their best football at the right time?
I'm a big Kyler Murray fan. I think he's a fascinating player. He can make plays. He's exciting, dynamic, all that. I think he's a guy that's going to win his team 10, 11 games. I think the Cardinals have a bright future with him. They'll be in the playoffs year after year. But now you're in the playoffs, and now you're at the time where you're playing against the best of the best. And in the NFC, that's Aaron Rodgers, that's Tom Brady, that's Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott. Like, I don't quite think, not that Kyler can never be at that level. I don't think he's quite at that level right now. But
Yeah.
he also has a fraction of the supporting cast of these other teams and these other quarterbacks. And I think without DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not going to put any stake in this team. I don't have a lot of confidence. They look so lost out on the football field when Hopkins is not out there. And even in games where Hopkins necessarily isn't putting up big numbers,
Yeah.
just the attention that he commands
Yeah.
is such a big deal. And it opens up so many other lanes for your sort of one-off guys like Christian Kirk and AJ Green. I think James Conner's had a really good year. I love Chase Edmonds as a running back, but
I do too.
they don't feel like a team that has enough without Hopkins to take down these top division winners in the NFC.
So do you view this as I don't know, I don't think you said this in the Rams, but you view the Rams as a pretty heavy favorite to win that game then?
I wouldn't say they're a pretty heavy favorite just because of the inconsistencies that they have, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams sort of crumble on Monday Night Football this week, but I do sort of expect them to win.
They're a should
But if,
win. Should win.
yeah, they should win. I think
Okay.
I would feel a little differently if the Cardinals had DeAndre Hopkins. I think that's just a huge, huge loss. It's a player that's just impossible to replace. Um, but I like the Cardinals. I like what they had at the beginning of the year, especially they started 7-0, and I think there's no reason to push the panic button. Like, you're in year 3 with Kyler Murray. You've gotten to the playoffs now. He's shown you he's the guy for the future. Gain some experience here. If you can pull off an upset, that's great. But get back at it next year, and you should feel very confident with where this roster's at. I think they're only going to get better from here.
I think this is the funny thing about the Cardinals, okay? So at the beginning of the year when they were on that run, that set off our expectation level for this team.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, first year has a rough year, gets new coaching staff. Second year, they take the logical step forward. They win a bunch of games, but they're just missing the playoffs. Third year, they make the playoffs. That's logical steps, is it not? Like 1 to 2 to 3 with Kyler Murray, and the team has slightly improved. They've added a little bit of talent here and there every year. J.J. Watt being one of them, who could be a major factor in the first round if he's healthy. I think if they're going to pull off the upset, J.J. Watt helps one of your weaknesses out a lot, which I feel like has been the run defense over this last final stretch, where if you, like I said, if you could slow down the Rams, running with Sony Michel and Cam Akers, maybe you got a shot to disrupt Matthew Stafford on top of Watt maybe being in their pass rushing with Chandler Jones. And they've certainly got, I think, aspects to them that I think are very unique. I think offensively, they have a very unique scheme. It's unlike any other with Cliff Kingsbury, although I'm critical of him. I think he sometimes is underrated and sometimes is overrated. Like, he's a funny guy because sometimes he puts together really good game plans. I thought he clearly outcoached Kellen Moore, and I like Kellen Moore in the Dallas game. I think the way he's utilized Edmonds and Connor, he's revitalized Connor's career, and he's played really well. AJ Green has played really well for them for the most part. I mean, he's had rough spots. But you look at them without DeAndre Hopkins, and that first game versus the Rams, it was really like D-Hop taking the attention and an AJ Green and Kirk like feasting off of that attention versus the weaker spots of the Rams secondary, right? And without that threat, it could be tough for them to replicate that. But I do think what they can rely on and what they can lean on is maybe that improved offensive line with Rodney Hudson, running the ball with Edmonds and Connor, and maybe even Kyler running more in this game and in the playoffs without DeAndre Hopkins, and trying to stress these teams different ways instead of having to rely on the 3rd and 8 in route from DeAndre Hopkins. So there are different ways that they could win in advance. Like, I think being more balanced, being more run-centered in the offensive attack, and then being explosive with Kyler Murray throwing the ball down the field, kind of like they were versus the Cowboys, and then defensively being your same aggressive self, blitzing a lot, making plays. I think they've got a very athletic linebacking group with some playmakers there, and there are weaknesses to this football team, though. As we brought up, offensively, it is probably not having DeAndre Hopkins. Defensively, I view it probably as the cornerback position, but what do you
100%.
view it as, Thomas? Do you agree?
I think Byron Murphy's taken a step forward this year, and that was a player I sort of liked coming out of college, and I thought they had some good value grabbing him in what I believe was the 2nd round. So he's taken some strides this year.
Well.
I like his play. Is he a number 1 corner? Like, think about who he's going to have to match up with now in the NFC, regardless of who they play. It's going to be Cooper Kupp. If they win, it's going to have to be probably Devontae Adams. Like, I just don't think he's quite that good yet. And I mean, very, very few guys are, but they don't have that lockdown guy. And I don't necessarily think they have the depth either that helps them by not having that lockdown CB1 type player. Buda Baker is phenomenal. Like, he's just so fun to watch. He's one of those players where if you've never watched a football game in your life and you just sit down,
Yeah.
probably in about 5-10 minutes, you'll say, okay, I don't know what's going on, but I know number 3 is really good. Like, he
He's
just pops off the
reckless.
screen.
He's just a reckless
Yeah.
abandon out there. He just
Yeah, so I like him. I like what they have. You mentioned their linebacking core. Like, they have some good players there. Isaiah Simmons, another guy who's taken a big step forward this year. A lot of people were ready to give him the bust tag after just one season, but
yeah.
he's been good. Jordan Hicks is that, tackle machine. So yeah, they have a couple players here in key spots. I just don't quite think it's enough. Like I said, it's only your third year of Kyler, so just continue to build. They have some nice building blocks. I'm not ready to say that they're quite at the level of the other NFC teams.
Yeah, so maybe Thomas is thinking it's got to be Kyler Murray that just goes off and carries this football team.
Yeah, I like what you said about him getting it done on the ground too, because I think it is going to be one of those like put the
You
team on their
have to,
back.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know,
So
but
let's see what he has. It's his first
yeah,
time in the playoffs, and it should be exciting.
yeah, I'm a little worried on how they entered the playoffs, but I think anything's possible with that guy and some of the big time playmakers that they have on both sides of the ball. There's potential for this team in the playoffs, but I do think it would take, definitely a lot, their best games of the season in order to get and to win the Super Bowl. The 6th seed, we've talked a lot about them already, the San Francisco 49ers, but as I told you, Thomas, I am a Kyle Shanahan stan, so I have to stand up for my boy, and I was all year long. People were calling for him to be fired, which I thought was utterly ridiculous, and my strategy towards firing people, as it is with Brian Flores, is if you fire a coach and he's going to be immediately hired by somebody else, it's probably not a good idea. But you look at the San Francisco 49ers, they went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I thought they were the best roster in football 2 years ago, although they lost in that upset. Or I guess it wasn't really an upset, but they lost the lead to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And this year, they've improved over the last couple of years offensively. They maybe declined defensively, but now they've got playmakers galore with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Mitchell has come on as a running back, and Brandon Ayuk as well. And the offensive line is pretty strong, especially run blocking wise. Trent Williams has been the best player in the NFL, maybe. I don't know. He's up there. And defensively, they still got Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. They've got pieces. How do you view this team? Or do you view them, like many other people, as a dark horse due to that experience that they kind of have, due to those playmakers that they have? Or do you view them as maybe a little bit overhyped entering the playoffs?
I think they're a very balanced team. When you look at rosters, though, it's a quarterback league. That's just the harsh reality of how the NFL is. And of the teams that I think people are sort of vaulting forward in the NFC, they have the worst quarterback. And that is something that it's difficult to overcome. But I think with their play calling and the pieces that they put around Jimmy Garoppolo, they find ways to make it work.
Yeah.
Offensive line is a top 5 unit. Run game is phenomenal. Elijah Mitchell's been a great story. Deebo Samuel, he's a weapon. He's not a wide receiver. He's not a running back.
Is he the best? Is he the best weapon in the league? I mean, this guy's insane.
Yeah, he's been very, very exciting to watch this year. So he's a player I really like. The defense is where I struggle a little bit. I'm not necessarily saying it's bad,
Yeah.
but it's not what it used to be. And before, in past years, when they went to the Super Bowl, the defense was propelling them forward. And I just
Very
don't
strong.
know if it's quite enough to make up for what they lack in other areas of their roster. Like, their secondary is a very, very big concern of mine. And I know they've had injuries throughout the year, but that's
Yeah.
just a position that ever since Richard Sherman, like, they just haven't been able to address it.
Yeah.
I mean, their linebackers I really, really like. Fred Warner goes without saying, but Aziz Al-Shaair has been a player that's really, really come on strong this year. And then, of course, up front, Nick Bosa's he's good for
Their
he's gonna get
D-line,
back.
I
Yeah.
think that's the X factor for them. Is their D-line is, I think everyone talks about Nick Bosa, rightfully so, but their D-line is very deep and pretty talented. Like, interior Armstead, DJ Jones has always been underrated for my money. Epucam, or however you say the guy's name, good player. Arden Key has been like a pretty good player for them. Like they always manage to have like 6 to 8 guys that are pretty good. And like, I understand these aren't household names, but if you watch the 49ers play, they're number 2 versus the run. They don't let you run on them. That's partly because they're strong schematically, but also they're very fast at linebacker. They're strong in the D-line. And then they've got a decent pass rush to get after you as well. But yeah, the cornerback position is definitely a concern to me. I think their safeties are pretty good. I think Jimmy Ward is an underrated player, and Tart, when he's playing, is solid. But the cornerback position is one where you can attack them outside the numbers consistently, and if you have the quarterback, if you have the receivers, you can definitely put up points. The question is, like, can you do that consistently enough? Because the Niners are going to have their plays where they're going to get, they're going to sack you if you drop back that much, and if you can't run the ball on them, because they're so good in that facet. So I think they're really, really interesting, because I view them as a defense that's really good, like in the middle of the field. But then if you stretch them outside, that's where you can attack them. So I agree with that. That's definitely their weakness. Jimmy Garoppolo you brought up as another potential weakness, but I think the key to them offensively is being able to stay ahead of the chains and being balanced, and having the run game optional, and having the play action optional. I was impressed that they were actually able to come back versus the Rams, because I don't view them as that type of team. And that's what kind of gave me an extra nudge to be like, I like this team as a dark horse, because they proved that to me. Garoppolo proved that to me. On the last drive versus a good pass rush, Jalen Ramsey, they were able to go out there and execute and win the game when they needed to. And they have that experience of the playoff runs of the past, where they were able to put it together. And I love Kyle. I love his play calling. I think he's a great coach who gives you a lot of advantages on offense, and I think they can score with a lot of teams. I think it comes down to, like, I'm worried if they still fall behind and Jimmy's having to be the 90% of the offense, and I am worried if you playing a Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, and those guys can dice you up. So yeah, you can see an avenue for success, but you can also see an avenue for maybe no success.
1,000%. And I think that's sort of becoming the trend with most of these teams, and this just comes down to the fact of how close and how competitive this NFC really is. But the 49ers, I like I said, I've still not decided on this Cowboys and 49ers game. I'm going back and forth. I'll probably won't decide until Saturday who I think is going to win. Like I said, I have the confidence in the Cowboys, but the 49ers, the way that they're built,
Yeah.
so strong up front on the offensive line, is something that I think through a long game, 4 quarters, if they can hold that ball, time possession, just really dominate an opposing defense and tire them out, they can make it very, very difficult. But like I said, it's similar to my analysis of the Titans from yesterday. Excuse me. They have to play the way that they want to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think what you said about them being built a certain way is also, as we've seen with a couple of these teams, like when we talk about the Titans, when we talk about the Patriots, the way they're built can give some issues to certain matchups. And like we discussed with the Packers, like we've said about the Rams, and we'll see with the Cowboys, like these are some of the top teams in this conference. Some of their biggest deficiencies are running the ball, stopping the run, right? The old school mentality. And that's what the Niners do really, really well. And that could give them an opportunity in these playoffs to be that dark horse. But they're going to have to be able to do that at a high clip, because we know that they have flaws in the passing game. So that's the 49ers. Our final seed, it's the Philadelphia Eagles as the 7 seed. First, I just want to say, I think what the Eagles have been able to do this year has been incredible. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand how they were able to become a playoff team. Before the year, a lot of people were saying this is a bottom 5 team in the NFC, and there was really no question about it. But Jalen Hurts, the coaching staff, Sirianni, and the offensive and defensive lines have kind of carried this team to success. Do you view them as a team that could be a team that could knock off the Bucs and do something special, or do you think they're just happy to be in the playoffs?
I think they've had a special season. For me, the story with them is really the reemergence of their offensive line, and I say
That's true.
reemergence because
Reemergence.
2 years ago they were a top offensive line, and last year, I mean, they had some injuries. Carson Wentz debacle, it just turned into a bottom unit, and Carson Wentz was taking sacks like it was nobody's business. This year, they've been phenomenal. They can run the ball so incredibly well, and it's crazy. It's not just how they run the ball in the red zone too, with all the rushing touchdowns. Meanwhile, their RB1 had 0 touchdowns this year, and Miles Sanders. It's Jalen
Fantasy
Hurts,
nightmare.
it's Boston Scott, it's Kenneth Gainwell, it's Jordan Howard. They're just seems like they're just picking guys off the street and saying, "Hey, do you want to play running back for us?" But they're
Thomas,
tough,
go
they're
ahead.
physical. They've impressed me, especially with how they started off the season. They're a young team. I like how Nick Sirianni was able to coach them out of an early hole. I hate to be this guy, and I'm gonna mention it, but then I'm also gonna defend the Eagles for this. If you look at their opponents that they beat,
Yeah.
it's not a lot to be excited about. But at the same time, you just gotta play who's in front of you, and it's hard to be consistent week to week in the NFL. And the way that they were able to win, to go 7 out of 2 down the stretch in the final half of the season, I thought was really impressive. And hey, good teams beat bad teams, and the Eagles were able to do that. They had a great stretch late where it was pretty much the Giants and Washington, and they handled them. They took care of business. They got themselves into the playoffs. And I think you could be already thrilled with the way the season was going for the Eagles. This is a team that, can't forget, has 3 first-round picks as well.
Yeah, that's why it's so impressive. They were trying to, I don't know what, they weren't trying to lose, but they weren't in a position where they had to win.
I think once they saw the Colts and the Dolphins turn around their seasons and realized that the dream for 3 top 10 picks was over, they figured, all right, we might as well win too. And now they have 3 picks in the top 20, probably. But yeah, I'm not all that confident that they're going to be able to get it done. It would be different if they weren't going up against the Tom Brady. And we mentioned earlier, the Bucs are incredibly hard to run on. The Eagles are all about running the football.
This is the worst matchup they could have drawn, honestly.
It's the absolute worst. And we've seen before in games where Jalen Hurts just has to drop back and throw.
Yeah,
it becomes a bit of a disaster. He still has a lot of work, he needs to refine those skills as a passer if he wants to be a successful quarterback for 10-plus years in this league. But I like what I've seen from them. But they're going to have to figure out a way to run on a team that's made it very difficult to run on. If they get down in the red zone, I think that's where they're really successful. But we'll see. They've surprised us all year. Maybe they can surprise us again. It's a more optimistic outlook than our 7 seed from a day ago, which was
it definitely is, because I view them as a team that whenever you're this strong on the offensive line and you've got guys like Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave on the defensive line, I view you as a team that should be taken seriously. Right. And Jalen Hurts is a dimension that is unique. So that makes them, a team that's a challenge, because the receiving core, you brought up Hurts's deficiencies. The receiving core also, it's not the greatest show on turf. This is a team that's Devontae Smith's a rookie. I like him a lot, but he's not really a top number 1 receiver at this point in time. And Dallas Goedert's a solid tight end, but they trade away Zach Ertz as that other dimension at the tight end position, and the receiving core behind that is very inconsistent. They've got some burners and stuff, but they're very one-dimensional. The running game is very, very unique, and that's why I feel with all their quarterback runs and read options and all that stuff that they can do, they're a challenge. But the Bucs are a tough matchup for them. I think if they would have drawn a Rams or a Cardinals, even the Cowboys with all their players in there, I think it would have been more of a potential upset opportunity on top of a defense that, let's face it, has a strong couple players, but plays pretty, and this is part of my problem with the team. I feel if they're a little bit more diverse defensively, if they're a little bit more They play very, very soft, like zone coverages, and they've gotten away with
Hmm.
that versus the worst quarterbacks when they've played the Giants
Yep.
and the Washington football team and like all these teams that they've been able to beat. Trevor Simeon. But when you play Tom Brady, it might be a little bit different. So they do feel a little bit like the Dolphins of the NFC, where they're a good team and they're able to beat those bad teams, but when they face the top teams, it might just be a little bit too much this year. But this is good news for Eagles fans who are hoping for a successful future.
100%. And I think it also works out for them a little bit that this is a rematch. They met
That's
the
true.
Buccaneers very early in the season on a Thursday night football game. So they have that tape that they can look back on. And that was a game that, if you look back at the final score, it was a lot closer than the game actually was.
Yeah.
Buccaneers stormed out to such an early lead, and this was at the time where Jalen Hurts, there was just no better quarterback at scoring 1 yard rushing touchdowns in the fourth quarter because he would just turn it on to another level. They managed to somewhat come back, but it was just too little, too late. But of course, that was the Eagles early on. Like they're a much different team now. I think they've discovered what they do effectively and what they don't do effectively. It just comes back to the point that what they want to do, I don't think that they're going to be able to do because I think they're going to have a hard time stopping the Bucs, and they're going to have a hard time, running on them as well.
That's funny because like I think that game was honestly the game that shifted a lot of things
Yeah.
because I
Hmm.
remember the crowd being like, why aren't you running the ball? Obviously at that point we understood that, and this was the thing at the beginning of the year where I was like, why aren't the Eagles like just playing into Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, who I like as a running back, and this offensive line who we know is good? Why don't they just run the ball like a bunch and then work off of that? And that seemed so obvious to a lot of people. And then they came out the first few weeks and they're like, okay, we're going to make Jalen Hurts Phillip Rivers and drop back and throw all these passes. Like, no. Like, what's the point of that? Just start running the ball. But that Bucs game, it felt like the right game plan because that's kind of how you beat Tampa Bay, but it's not what the Eagles are good at, right? So it's now they've kind of figured out that identity as you said, and they're a much different team for the Bucs to face than they were earlier in the year offensively. So that's going to be really intriguing to see how that goes down this time. But those are your 7 seeds for the NFC. Thomas, any final thoughts on the NFC? And I know I got to get your prediction for who is going to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, final thoughts is there's 7 teams in this, playoff, and realistically, and I hate to, be the bad guy in the Eagles, but realistically, I think maybe 5.5 of these teams have a real shot of doing some damage in these playoffs. And the reason I say 5.5, that's on a condition that DeAndre Hopkins returns.
Yeah, I was going to say
Um,
you're not very high on the Cardinals, so I was going to say you're
yeah,
probably going to say about 5 teams here, but
yeah, and I'll give them that credit. With DeAndre Hopkins, I just think that they're a completely different football team. I'm excited because in recent years, it's just been, okay, let's just wait for the NFC Championship, or let's just wait for the AFC Championship. And it's just been, yeah, we're excited to watch the games, but at the end of the day, we sort of have a gut feeling of what's going to happen. And if anything different happened from that, it was viewed as a huge upset. I
yep.
don't necessarily think that that's the case this year. I think it's
Yep.
very balanced, and I'm excited. It's been an interesting year, and I hope the playoffs can keep up with that.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think last year in the NFC it was a 3-team race in my opinion. It was Packers, Saints, and Bucks. And this year it's I feel a little bit more open than that. And I know you're picking the Packers, I think.
I think I'm going to pick the Packers to go. Maybe it's a little bit boring. Maybe it's just a little bit of a traditional pick, but it just comes back to that connection with Rodgers and Adams. And I know you were pleading for them to do a little bit more and be a little bit more, maybe unpredictable on offense. But I just think that you can have 2 weeks, you can have 3 weeks to scheme for that, and just good luck because we saw last year. Even when Jalen Ramsey was on him, Devontae Adams just showed the world who the best receivers in the NFL. And I think that's just how the NFL is built these days. It's an offensive league. All the rules favor the receiver, all the
You're
rules
right.
favor the quarterback. And I think they have the best quarterback and the best wide receiver in the NFL. I know you're not going to like to hear that because you think Brady's the MVP of the league, but I'm going to pick the Packers, and we'll see if it comes back to bite me.
I will say, Thomas, they better hope they don't see Tom Brady. That's all I'm going to say
Yeah,
about
I
that.
mean, I'd be scared. I'd be scared if that was the case. I'll say
That's
that.
all I'm going to say. No, but this is what I say, honestly. And this is what I say, honestly. The Packers, I think they should win this year. They have no excuse. I mean, outright. They have no excuse not to win this year. If they lose this year, I think there is something wrong. But I will say, I don't bet against Tom Brady ever. Ever. I think it's just a bad game plan. So that is obviously my selection for the NFC. I can't. Until somebody beats them or beats him, I feel like a dummy if I don't pick him. So I've got to pick the Bucs, even though they are a little bit beat up entering these playoffs. So that is our NFC breakdown. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, Gronk, spike that like button, subscribe to the channel, and Thomas, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, once again, Instagram is at Catch the Blitz. Make sure to head over there. And as well, the YouTube at Catch the Blitz as well. Make sure to check out our podcast that drops every single Monday. As well, we do another podcast later in the week that previews the week's games. So that's always fun too. Thanks again, Mitch, for having me on. Hopefully, we can look back on this in about not 6 weeks' time, in about a month's time, and not feel too stupid about ourselves.
Yeah.
Hopefully what we said ages quite well, but it was a lot of fun, so thank you once again.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I hope you guys, the audience out there, got a lot out of this, and it's nice to have Thomas's perspective, somebody outside of my own realm of thought, somebody out there in the CTB world there, stirring up the graphics. But I love what you do over there and all the content you put out. So hopefully we can join forces again throughout the playoffs. If you ever want to join a live stream or do anything, I know the people would love to have you on the BLV.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mitch.
Peace, guys. Thanks for watching.